Welcome, everyone. My name's Jennifer McFarlane, and I'm welcoming you to the WSPS Safety Connections on fines and penalties in warehousing and distribution. This is an amazing session, but before we get into the discussion, I do want to go through some housekeeping tips. So if you've never been with us before on Safety Connections, we love to run these sessions, but we need to do a little bit of housekeeping. In regards to that, so a few tips. This session will be recorded. So FYI on that. We will also be, as we record the session, I'll be monitoring the chat. You've been all muted as well. And so if you have any comments or whatnot, or even want to say hi, please do so in the chat. So as a few tips to make your experience even better is making sure that we've got computer audio. So you can actually plug in just like I am with my headset. That's the recommended procedure. The other thing is please mute all devices and apps to avoid those distractions. And again, use the chat. We want to hear from you. And the chat is a great way for us to communicate. And your microphone will be muted for this particular session. Again, you're joining the WSPS Safety Connections. So a little bit more further engagement, you can actually use an instantaneous reaction. At the very top of your ribbon, you'll see that you can put a thumbs up, you can put a clapping sign, a heart, and would love for you to actually demonstrate that to me, that you can actually use that. So maybe a round of applause for our Safety Connections this morning would be great. Awesome. So we're all on track there. And the other piece is that public chat as well. And we love to have this be interactive. So in order to do that, with the amount of people that are participating today, we'll do that through polling. So keep an eye out for those pollings. I'll call them out as Norm pulls them up as well. And we're going to have an interactive conversation in the chat and also in the polling. If you're viewing, you could also use F11 toggles to a fuller screen. So for those of us that might need a larger screen, please use that F11. It toggles to a full screen as well. And we also have those live chat. So what are our goals in regards to Safety Connection? We've been running these for over 4 years on a virtual session, and our goals are basically to connect with you virtually, to make it easier for industry to join in and participate with us. And we want to facilitate basically a really good exchange between the practice, what's happening in industry and ourselves, and also what's happening in other areas of the world in occupational health and safety, but really laser focused on the Ontario landscape. And then also, it really allows you to attend from your personal workspace as well. So we want to learn together, we want to share with each other, and we want to discover really what's of value to you, and also communicate better with you. So just an awesome opportunity. Even during the summer months, it's funny because we just had this conversation. These sessions are really well attended, and we thank you for your participation. Please come back again and also see us for other Safety Connections. So I wanted to introduce to you my colleague, an expert in his field, Norm Kramer. And I think that most of you actually on the call have actually heard of Norm, but let me introduce you to my colleague here. Norm Kramer is a dedicated professional who specializes in health and safety consulting for Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, WSPS. And Norm has expertise in warehousing and distribution, operations, also manufacturing, service sector, and the list goes on. He has really applied this expertise and to ensure that workplaces are safe and compliant as well, as we see the landscape of the legislation also changing over the years through the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And so I want to share just with you just a short glimpse of Norm's background here. He is a specialized consultant in warehousing and distribution for WSPS. He's a Canadian registered safety professional. He holds a certification and really demonstrating his commitment to occupational health and safety. He's also, and not very many people have this designation, so I really want to call this out to the team here, is a professional in materials management. This is a very difficult designation to get, and Norm has achieved that as well, which is unbelievable. It gives him that comprehensive knowledge and extends to the specific needs of warehousing and distribution centers. Norm, I don't want to date him, but he has over 25 years experience in the field, and he's just, again, honed these awesome skills into the warehousing sector. We're really fortunate enough to have Norm working with WSPS, and he conducts risk assessments, develops prevention programs, delivers training solutions. And one of his greatest, as his colleague, I know this firsthand, one of his greatest satisfactions comes from witnessing workplaces actually implement safety solutions and achieve positive business solutions. Please join me in welcoming Norm Kramer.
Well, thank you so much, Jen, for that beautiful introduction. So I'm just...
Did you see all the applause? Well deserved, Norm. Well deserved.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. So friends, it's so nice to have you join us today. And we're going to be reviewing 10 specific cases that are connected with warehouse and distribution. And like you can see from this slide here, we're going to focus in on highlights from the case, applicable legislation, penalties that were levied, lessons learned, and resources. So we'll go through this fairly quickly. And as we go through it too, I'll ask a few questions, and we have some polls like Jen said. So certainly we welcome and invite your participation. Okay, so let's get right into the first case now. So this case is a worker who was struck by a pallet pushed over a 1.5-inch blue space. So this incident occurred at approximately 7 o'clock in the morning. So an employee was standing near a cart picking product, and a box fell off a pallet onto the top level of a rack. And this was not visible from the lower level of the racking. Now, when the lift truck operator pushed a pallet onto the top level of the beam, the pallet made contact with the displaced box, and it pushed the pallet next to it off of the rack. So basically what happened, the pallet fell from the top level of the rack and struck a female employee who was 39 years of age. The employee was hospitalized with back and neck fractures. So what legislation applied? Well, most of the cases that we're going to be talking about this morning is from Ontario, but this particular case happened in the United States. So you can see there the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, 1910.176B, has a section on secure storage. And basically, it says their materials stored in tiers shall be stacked, blocked, interlocked, and limited in height so that it is stable and secure against sliding or collapse. Fairly straightforward, and perhaps you can even recognize similar wording that we have in Section 45 of the industrial regs here in Ontario. Now, what was the penalty that was levied? So interestingly, in the US, there's an informal fine and an issued fine, and you can see it listed there. One of my colleagues in the US made the comment that if a company does some things, the fines may be lowered. But this is where I'd like to involve yourselves here. How could this have been prevented? And, you know, not necessarily looking at this specific case, but if we think of preventing items from falling off a top level racking onto pedestrians that might be below, what are some thoughts that you might have? And feel free to just type it in the chat there. How could this have been prevented, or this type of thing be prevented in the future? And so I see a comment there, netting. Yes, thank you. Kyle, Ben mentioning gate barriers. Those are some good engineering controls. Shrink wrap. Yeah, just make sure the load is secure. Thank you, Daniel. Abe, the pallet could have been wrapped before stored. Absolutely. Yeah, those are some really good ideas. And so we can expand on this a little bit now. So basically, you know, one of the first things that we should be doing is remove people. This is really your best option when there's a risk of pallets falling from an adjacent aisle. Securing the load by shrink wrap or by strapping is a great idea, and some of you have commented that in the chat. When stacking boxes on a pallet, place the heavier boxes on the bottom. Keep the loads within the footprint of the pallet. Make sure that the load is centered. Those are all great ideas. And also, just to touch on row spacers for a moment. Now, row spacers ensure there's an open area between the back-to-back rack called the flue space. So usually you might have one row spacer for approximately 10 feet of frame height. Now, the flue space permits heat to vent upwards and activate sprinklers. And the National Fire Protection Association requires 6 inches of flue space. And just some other ideas are the forklift may have positioning lasers which support accurate placement of the forks in the pallet. That's also a great solution. Camera technology may be used to permit visibility in racking at high elevations. And of course, just ensure you have adequate lighting. Make sure that there's good visibility from below. Pallets that are too large may have excessive overhang, so that can be a problem. And pallets that are too small may also be an issue because they may not be making contact with both beams. So it's also important to use the right size pallet whenever possible. So we do have some resources here at WSPS, and this is just one that's shown, and we'll be providing links to all of the resources that we have in this presentation here afterwards and send it out to you. But we have developed some tip sheets, and this one is racking safety, what workers need to know, and it has some basic tips. And you know, sometimes safety doesn't have to be complicated. We can keep it simple. So load pallets of material evenly on racks from front to back. That's one tip. Another one, always place pallets centered over both beams to make sure they're secure and stable. Ensure the load is secure to the pallet using shrink wrap or strapping, which has been commented on. So those are some tips that's found within this resource. And we'll be providing links as we mentioned. Okay, so now we have a poll, and we'll get Emily to pull up the poll here. To ensure a stable pallet load on both beams, pallet overhang should be A, 1 inch only, B, 3 to 6 inches, C, 2 to 4 inches, or D, no overhang flush with the beam. So what's your thought on that one? And we're getting some comments here. C is a common answer, yeah. 2 to 4 inches. Okay, very good.
2 to 4 inches. We've got C. We do have some D's in there, Norm.
Okay, well. Yeah, interesting. Okay, good. So yeah, we just want to comment on this slide here that you know, if we take the most common example in the industry, so we have a 48-inch deep pallet with a 42-inch deep pallet rack. We need to center the pallet so we have 3 inches overhang on each side of the beam. Now, if we use the same example, but we leave no overhang in the front, we may create 6 inches of overhang in the back. And so that can be a problem. there could be an overload over the back beam and also over the back upright. So the flue space will be encroached upon, and there's a risk of the operator when placing a pallet on the other side of the rack of making contact with the pallet and causing it to be displaced, especially, of course, when there's back-to-back racking. And, finally, proper pallet overhang in the front is really important. The front, because it will prevent potential impact from the mast of the forklift contacting the beam. So we want to make sure that there's, like it says on the slide there, there's 2 to 4 inches of overhang. And of course, centering the pallet on the rack, it really stabilizes the entire structure. And I just wanted to make a comment too on some of the engineering controls, and a couple of people have mentioned that as well, that there are accessories that could be used, and some companies use them very well. I've seen rack straps used effectively as an example. Netting, someone mentioned that, especially where people go to prevent pallets from falling off. And wire mesh panels, which is a stronger barrier if pallet drops are a major concern. And then there's backstops, there's load stop brackets that could be used as well. So these are all effective controls that could be used. Okay, so here's another case. So we're talking about the rack capacity, loading and unloading instructions that were not made available. So in this particular case, this happened to be in BC. So WorkSafe BC inspector found that there's visible damage on a large storage rack. And there's damage on the vertical members, on the posts, and cross bracing, so the horizontal and diagonal members as well. And there's no safety information that was available at the time in terms of rack capacity, and no information on loading and unloading instructions. And so with this case, the inspector issued a stop use order, was issued for the entire rack structure. And so really the issue was around the damaged racks were not repaired or not replaced. The rated capacity was not posted, so it could be visibly seen by workers. And there were no instructions for loading and unloading, and no instructions around maintenance of the rack following the manufacturer's recommendations. These were not readily available. So all of these were repeat violations in this particular case. So meaning the company didn't correct non-conformances in a timely manner. So what legislation is applied? Well, like I said, this happened in BC. So Occupational Health and Safety Regs 4.43.1. Interestingly, in BC, their legislation is a little more specific when it comes to steel storage racks. So you can see their instructions for safely loading and unloading and maintaining the rack should be available. The rated capacity should be posted and visible, and there should be regular maintenance as well. So that's the legislation. Now, interestingly, with this case, nobody was injured, but a fine was issued. And I just would be curious to get your comments. How much do you think this fine actually was for this case? So there was rack damage, but no one was injured. Feel free to type a number in the chat, and then I'll show the answer.
This is a great question, Norm. So how much do we think that the fine, nobody was injured, it's in British Columbia under provincial legislation. Okay, so we've got some comments coming in, 5K, 2,500, 8,000, 50,000. I feel like I'm an auctioneer here.
Yeah, very interesting. Interesting, this fine is over $330,000. Wow.
Wow.
That's incredible. So, friends, I'll get you to type in the chat now. How could this be prevented? So what are some thoughts that you have to prevent a steel storage rack having damage and subsequently putting workers at risk? So we see regular inspections from Ben.
And I
And
have a question here actually in the chat. Where should the rated capacity be posted?
yeah, that's a great question. The capacity should be available. We've seen rack configurations where basically the beam level is the same throughout an entire row, and it's been appropriate to post at the end of the row a sign which indicates the capacity of the beam and the capacity of the bay. So that may be a good option. In some workplaces where it varies because of the movement of the beam, it may be posted perhaps at the bay level. So it really depends, but basically the bottom line is that workers need to know what the capacity is of your rack structure.
Yeah. So communicating to the workers what the capacity is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for the comment. Just looking at the last comment here, training
Yeah.
and proper work instructions and reporting procedures,
Yeah.
regular preventive maintenance. So that's great.
Yeah.
So just to expand on this a little bit, the CSA, for your information, if you're not aware, has just revised the user guide to steel storage racks, A34424. And this is really an excellent resource for companies that inspect their own racking. So the best practice really includes inspecting monthly and having a professional inspection done annually. And some lift truck operators, especially where there's lots of pallet movement, participate in inspections even on a daily basis. You know, I think of it, I like the KISS principle, keep it simple, smart person. Just answer the 5 W's. You know, who inspects, what is inspected, when is it done, where is it done, why? And answer these questions and just make sure it's done. The capacity of both the beam and the bay should be easily viewed, like we were just talking about. And the engineer who supervises expert inspection should establish damage limits for the loaded racks. And this is typically done by measuring the apex. So if you were to place a straight edge, for example, over the damage, and then measure the damage where the deepest indentation is, or the greatest gap, and get a professional opinion from an engineer. And when we talk about accountability, which is on the slide here, we're referring to who does what, and when, and are they doing it. So really everyone has a role to play. The employer establishes a written standard around rack inspection. A training should take place. It might be in-house, it might be external training. A supervisor and the committee member inspects. The engineer determines what is safe and what is not safe. And the damage is then cordoned off, and the lift truck operators also report and do not use it. So everyone has a role to play. And if one of the links in the chain breaks, we could say there's definitely a problem. So in terms of resources, WSPS has developed a resource. You can see it there, Racking Safety, what supervisors need to know. And I have a copy here. And the one thing I like about this resource is it has a basic checklist. It's not detailed, but it does guide companies to know some of the basics in terms of what to look for. So for example, we talked about capacity signage. Is it on the racking? Is it easily viewed? Are there any damaged racking components that need to be repaired or replaced? Is there any detached components that need to be fixed? And are all components positioned according to manufacturer specifications? So yeah, it's a great little resource, and again, we'll provide this for your benefit.
So Norm, just to let you know, I just put that in our chat too. And as Safety Connections is, we will follow up with you in regards to some resources.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. So here's a question that we'll get your comments on. It is preferable to place capacity stickers on each beam instead of row ends to increase visibility. Is that true or false? So we're seeing a variety of answers coming in. Okay. Thank you very much, Chuck. Never on the beams. Oh, just lost it there. Okay, good. So we're getting some different answers here. So let's pull up the answer. So we would say this is false. You know, labels on the beams can misrepresent load limits if the beams are relocated. So that's the issue. That's a concern. And of course, moving beams should be done with the manufacturer's or engineer's approval, as this can lower the capacity as well. And we showed the, all right, we showed the resource. So here's one where forklift drivers were convicted for cell phone use in the warehouse. So in this particular case, this is interesting because tickets were issued to lift truck operators using cell phones while sitting on their lift trucks. And, you know, a coworker observed this and they complained to the supervisor and senior manager who tried to resolve the issue. And the coworker staged a work refusal and the ministry inspector was called in. So the operator's version, interestingly, was the cell phone was only used to check time. And another employee said that someone else was using their cell phone as well. So that's some interesting. Now, just a little bit more information on this. The court decided that operating or using a lift truck included sitting on equipment even when it was stopped. And other workers were maybe nearby and may be put at risk as a result of this. So the lift truck was not stopped in a safe zone and so that it would not interfere with traffic. And it was basically compared to a car that was parked at a red light or a stop sign with somebody on their cell phone. And so the employer in this particular case actually had a rule not to use cell phones. And they had a sign that was posted. It had a picture of a cell phone and it had a slash through it, indicating that cell phones were not to be used on the warehouse floor. So the court compared a lift truck operator using a cell phone to a car driver holding a cell phone or other mobile communication device. So this case really does emphasize or show the ministry's expectations for employers to enforce a zero tolerance policy with respect to cell phone use in dangerous workplaces. And of course, in this case, we're talking about dangerous workplaces with lots of mobile equipment movement and pedestrians in the same area. Now, what legislation was applied? So in this case, it was 28(2)(b) of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So we know this for Ontario. No worker shall operate any equipment or work in a manner that may endanger himself, herself, or any other worker. So pretty straightforward there. And the penalty was basically just under $1,000 ticket for each of the operators. So if we think about distractions in the workplace, and you know, we think about drivers or could even be pedestrians that are using cell phones. The question is, how could this have been prevented? And perhaps I can get some comments in the chat there to see what ideas that you have on how this really could be prevented from happening again.
This is a conversation that, yeah, this is a conversation we're having more and more, isn't it, Norm?
For sure.
So it'd be great to see some ideas coming from the folks here. How could this have been prevented?
So training and supervision. Thanks for that, Ken. Yeah, nice comment. And a lot of this is enforcement. Yeah, Jeff just took the words out of my mouth. Firm enforcement, supervision. Machines have a lockbox for phones on them that only open when they're off. Okay, that's an interesting solution. Phones stay in the lunchroom. Starts with leadership and supervision, which need to apply what they learn. Do safety walks. I guess that's around supervision and also enforcement as well. Very clear policy and training. Okay, excellent. So here's a couple of other, oh, sorry, Jen, go ahead.
I was just going to say some awesome ideas coming in the chat here.
Yeah, for sure. So here's a couple more ideas. The case really illustrates the seriousness with which safety regulators have viewed cell phone infractions by workers. Interestingly, on the case that we just considered, one legal perspective referred to this and said, employer may have a well-written policy. However, if there's an unwillingness of the employer to enforce their own policy, it could also result in the supervisor and employer being charged. So, to keep it simple, it's recommended that cell phones should be banned from dangerous workplaces altogether, especially when workers are engaged in work that's potentially hazardous to themselves and others. So distracted workers are as dangerous as really distracted drivers on highways. So this case really demonstrates that a no cell phone policy should be in place and should be respected and followed. So we do have a resource, another one, and you can see that there's several resources that follow a theme. So we had one for racking, one for pedestrian, and it looks at employer, supervisor, and worker responsibility. So this one is pedestrian safety, what workers need to know. It just has some basic safety tips. And here's one: avoid use of cell phones or other distractions in work areas. So again, these are available for you. So let's do a bit of a poll or knowledge check here. A smartwatch is not a distraction when operating a lift truck because it's worn on the wrist. So is this true or is this false? A smartwatch is not a distraction when worn on the wrist. So we're getting some answers come in. Okay, looks like we're seeing a pretty much a consensus here that that this is a false. Yeah. So we want to remember that no worker shall operate any equipment that may endanger themselves or another worker, or in a way that may endanger themselves. So, of course, in each case, the use of a smartwatch would have to be handled individually. But here's a couple questions you could consider at your workplace if this situation does exist. Was the operator checking the time, or were they using it to read email, as an example? One is, of course, going to be more of a distraction. Is there a company policy that prohibits this? Did the distraction result possibly in an incident? Or what effect does this technology have on other workers that may nearby? Is it a cause of stress for them? So really, just to summarize, in your workplace, establish clear behaviors, put these in writing, communicate, train, and enforce. So those are some key points here. So here's another case. Reversing a trailer at a loading dock causes a fatality. So in this example, it was a temp worker was fatally injured after being struck by a tractor trailer reversing at the loading dock. Now, in this particular case, the temp worker was wearing a white lab coat, was crouched beneath the loading dock, and was smoking and using the cell phone as well. And reading the details of this case, this happened for 8 minutes in total. So the tractor trailer arrived. It was to be loaded. The driver got out of the truck, opened the rear trailer doors, looked at the loading dock, and sounded the horn twice. So we would look at this case and we would think to ourselves, well, the driver did everything right. The trailer also had reversing lights, so everything was in good condition. There was an audible backup alarm that went off. The driver reversed slowly. The driver paused twice, and then unfortunately made contact with the rear dock, crushing the temp worker between the trailer and the loading dock. When they reviewed this case, the external lighting was acceptable, and they had do not enter and no trespassing signs were there as well. So there's a legislation that was applied. Now this happened in Ontario. the industrial regulations, Reg 851. Again, there's section 20. We see that quite a bit. Barriers or safeguards for the protection of workers shall be used where traffic may endanger the safety of any worker. This is a very common piece of legislation that's applied when this hazard is identified. And what was the penalty? With the victim surcharge was over $400,000 in this case. So if we just spend a moment on this and perhaps get some of your comments on the chat, how could something like this be prevented from happening? So we think of all the truck traffic that occurs in your yard and trucks that are backing up to the loading dock. What has to be done to prevent pedestrians from being struck around the loading dock area or even in the yard as a whole? So backup alarms, use spotters. Yeah, thank you for that. High visibility vests, no pedestrian areas, restricted areas, keep pedestrians out. Yeah, one of the biggest things is to keep people out of the area. Utilize a camera, have a no walk zone. A backup camera. Yeah, these are great ideas. I love that idea of a backup camera. Design something that prevents people from going into the area. Okay, so those are great ideas. And just to build on your thoughts, and I think you hit on most of them, and we've listed a few more here. You know, during the cold or wet weather, we've seen employees that they take their smoking breaks at the loading dock where it may be partially covered. So one of the things that you could ask yourselves at your workplaces is, do I have suitable break areas to prevent this from happening? So outdoors, a guardrail between the person door and the loading dock has also been effectively used and installed to guide pedestrians away from the exterior loading dock. So that also may be a good solution. Now, in this particular case, this company, they removed a cigarette butt disposal container from the loading dock area. So we know that of course, is a no smoking area, but they had that container there, so that was moved. They relocated the smoking area and they built a roof structure. They installed more signs. They installed a physical barrier to create a bit of a separation between the pedestrian door and the loading docks where trucks are backing up. They put some safety markings on the pavement, and they also developed a traffic management plan. So those are some great ideas that were used. Now, in terms of resources, so at WSPS, we have a pedestrian safety sheet for supervisors. And again, I have this sheet in front of me here, so I'm just looking at it. And it also has a checklist that's part of this resource sheet that companies can use to make sure that they're doing the right things. And although the main direction of this resource may be for lift truck traffic in a warehouse, you can also apply the same principles to truck traffic in the yard. So operators travel with an unobstructed view. Signage is visible in good condition as another example. Mirrors are kept clean. So those are just some thoughts in addition to what we talked about. So here's a question for you. The person directly responsible to ensure the trailer is secured to the loading dock is A, driver, B, supervisor, C, operator who enters a trailer, or D, senior manager? So what do you think? So we're getting some answers in the chat there. Actually getting a variety of answers. This is interesting. So let's talk about this for a moment. So we've selected the operator who enters a trailer. And when we look at the question, we just, the way it's worded, the person directly responsible. So if we just think about this really simply, who has the most to lose if the trailer leaves the loading dock prematurely? Isn't it the lift truck operator who loads and unloads? So he or she is the one who could possibly fall off the edge of a loading dock or possibly fall off the edge of a trailer. This is a person who could be in the trailer when the truck leaves and could fall off the back. So, the mobile equipment operator who enters the trailer should at least confirm that the truck and trailer is secured at the dock. And, the driver may be the one who places the wheel chocks at the rear tires, or it could be another restraint system that's used, perhaps. However, this cannot be relied upon, and it should be checked. So here's another case. A forklift strikes a worker, causing a critical injury. So this critical injury occurred after a worker was struck by a lift truck that was operating in reverse, just like the title indicates. Now, a few more details to consider. The injured worker was pulling a load of scrap plastic sheeting over to the grinding machine. So we think of a manual pallet jack pulling a load. The lift truck operator had just then picked up a pallet from the shrink wrapper and then had reversed into the worker. And the worker fell and was partly run over. What a tragic case. So the legislation that was applied here's Section 20 again. Barriers or other safeguards for the protection of workers shall be used where traffic may endanger the safety of any worker. And that expression, safeguards, and in the legislation, other safeguards, really it's connected. You need to take action. Businesses need to conduct their own hazard or risk assessment and identify specific issues and take specific measures to protect their employees. So what's the penalty? With the victim surcharge was over $87,000. So again, what a horrific case. So here we see a lift truck operator reversing into another worker or pedestrian. What do you think needs to be done? Feel free to type in some comments in the chat to prevent something like this from happening in your workplace. So training. Okay, good. Blue lights and reversing. Yeah, that can be a great awareness piece for pedestrians that might be near lift trucks. We also see the halo lighting, which may be effective as well. A risk assessment, guardrails, barriers. Yeah, good. Just create a distinct separation. Alarms when backing up. Those are some great ideas. So here's a couple of other thoughts here you can see on the slide. Some workplaces have preferred to use like a stand-up walkie mobile equipment because it's easier for operators perhaps to look in the direction of travel without having to twist in a seated position with awkward posture. So sometimes that's been a bit of an issue. One-way traffic flow may also reduce the frequency. Mobile equipment operators reverse. That could work. And consider too, if your equipment is in the best optimal location. And this could be equipment like the garbage compactor, the shrink wrapper, or the pallet dispenser. Could you possibly reduce congestion by relocating equipment? One business that we supported, they had a conveyor system that had frequent lift truck traffic that was going to the conveyor and was picking up pallets, but then the lift truck operator backed up right into a pedestrian traffic lane. And so what this business did is they just repositioned the conveyors approximately 90 degrees. So the lift truck could pick up the pallet in a different area, which was away from the busy people traffic. It was a relatively simple solution, but it worked. And there was no more reversing into pedestrians. And you can see some other ideas on the slide there. Proximity sensors are becoming more and more popular, whether it be for the lift truck operator or the pedestrian, where it gives off a bit of a audible sound or possibly something that's visual as well to warn others of each other's presence. So that's becoming more popular and is being used effectively. We do have a resource here where forklift strikes worker causing critical injuries. And in this resource, I like it because it does list B335, which is a CSA standard for lift trucks. And it's got some simple tips, but are very tried and true and effective. A sound horn at blind corners and intersections to warn pedestrians. Make eye contact with the pedestrian, provide right of way, communicate such as by hand gesture, drive with unobstructed views, and look in the direction of travel. So simple things, but these things are very effective. So here's a knowledge check. Warehouse traffic rules may include A, speed limits, B, stopping at intersections, C, hand and horn signals, D, load height on forks, or E, all of the above. So go ahead and comment. All right, so we're getting a bit of a consensus that all of the above applies. Very good. So there's an organization, a Material Handling Equipment Distributor Association. They recommend a maximum speed of 8 miles per hour, 13 kilometers per hour, which is significantly faster than walking speed. But when you're working in high traffic areas, such as around pedestrians, this drops to 3 miles per hour or 5 kilometers per hour, which is basically walking speed. So this is a guideline, it's not legislated, but workplaces need to really balance their speed with safety. Consider all the risk factors that's involved and include nearby pedestrians that may be as well in the picture. Some lift trucks now, they have some great technology. They have speed limiter devices built into the equipment that limits how fast they can go. So that can be effective. Others slow down automatically at busy intersections. And some might have a speed alarm that's built into it that warns operators at a set speed, maybe by a flashing light or an audible sound. So these are all options that are used. Okay, let's look at the next case. So worker trips over empty pallets causing a fatality. What a tragic story. So in this case, a worker who performs maintenance or janitorial tasks was asked to help offload a pallet using a pallet jack. Now, the worker basically walked backward and tripped on an empty pallet which was situated on the floor. So the worker fell, was complaining about injuring both their hand and their head due to the impact on the concrete floor, and essentially went home. Now, the worker called in sick the next day and did not return to work and passed away in the hospital some 2 weeks later. What a tragic story. You know, some of the most common injuries around pallets are when workers trip over them, or they step on pallets, or they fall on them. So workers may not see the pallet, or they're not aware that they shouldn't be walking on it because it could break and they could trip and they could fall as well. So looking at the legislation here, Section 11 is applied of the industrial regulations. Floors shall be kept free of obstructions and hazards, and measures and procedures prescribed should be carried out. So 25(1)(c) around housekeeping, for example. The fine in this case with the victim surcharge was $75,000. So friends, here we have a case where a worker was walking backwards and they tripped on a single pallet on the floor, and was using a pallet jack in this case. So what do you think? How could something like this be prevented, where you prevent trips and falls at your workplace, perhaps even thinking about the loading dock area? Any thoughts that you have? I'll just monitor the chat for a moment. So Jeff, 5S, yeah, so everything stored in its proper place to make sure that there's no obstructions. Good housekeeping. A couple of people said 5S, very good. Better housekeeping, clean up as you go. So that's excellent. Yeah, training on slip, trips, falls. Thank you. A pallet program. Yeah, these are great ideas that you're throwing out there. The skid zones are a place where you can store pallets. Walk forward. Yeah, walk forward instead of reverse. Get rid of damaged pallets. Looking at this next slide, I think we pretty well captured all of these points here. You know, first of all, keep the loading dock clear of trip hazards, such as empty pallets. Some warehouse operations, they've effectively stored pallets in racking, which is installed above the loading dock area, and that's reduced some clutter at the loading dock. But of course, workers need to look. They need to be aware of their surroundings. We know that. Generally, and someone mentioned this in the chat, generally push the load rather than pull it if at all possible. This can allow you to see where you're going. And also pushing allows you to use your leg muscles instead of sort of twisting and putting a strain on your back, especially when operating a manual pallet jack. And if you must pull the load, of course, just use caution and be sure you know what's in front of you as you're pulling. And don't step on pallets. Don't step over pallets. Walk around them. This sounds really simple, but don't assume workers know this. Establish or implement a program, and somebody put this in the chat as well. There's equipment like a pallet dispenser, and it looks like a Pez candy dispenser. It's strategically located in a workplace, and it can also remove pallet clutter in the workplace, and it can be very effective. And be careful too when using expendable pallets, which are designed really for just a single use only, and they can be easily damaged. Prefer to use the sturdier type pallets, the double face pallets with the boards on the top and the bottom, such as the commonly used CHEP pallet. So there is a resource here that's on our website as well, 9 ways to prevent pallet injuries. And we'll make sure that you have access to that. So here's another knowledge check for you. Workers on mobile ladders should, and A, always use a handrail, B, carry objects with only one hand, C, ensure load fits between the handrail, D, not block view with the object, and E, all of the above. So what would you say there? We'll see what you come up with. So we're seeing lots of E's, all of the above. Okay, that's excellent. Good. So, we put this in here because it's not exactly related to tripping on a pallet, but it's related to falls, and in this case, it maybe falls from heights. But it is an issue that we've seen come up repeatedly. So we just want to emphasize a couple of pointers here. Don't reach too far on a ladder. It's easy to lose your balance if you were to do this. Large, awkward, unbalanced, and heavy loads can affect a worker's balance and their view. And you might have a mobile tubular ladder too that has a grade or a slope that's over 50 degrees. That may have a manufacturer's requirement to face the ladder when descending. And of course, if you're handling an item while you're facing the ladder, this can be very awkward or difficult to do. Make sure also the locking mechanism is engaged on the ladder. We've seen that that's caused issues. Falls have occurred when the ladder has moved unexpectedly, causing the worker to lose balance, maybe because of a lack of maintenance on the ladder, because the locking mechanism is not effective. Or sometimes we've seen the rubber pieces that are on the end of the leg worn off, and so it's not gripping, causing the ladder to remain stationary. So we just want to finish off by saying, when working on a ladder and performing work, when we think of this mobile ladder, to be readily available or able, we could say, to achieve a 3-point contact. So let's look at this case. Cat litter spill not initially reported. So this is interesting. Manufacturer of cat litter, they added a scent to their product. Now, a person in the vicinity of the company reported to the ministry an odor causing an irritation to the eyes and throat. So the ministry, they contacted the company, and they said they weren't working with a scent-based product the day before they got the call. Now, a few days later, another person in the vicinity, in the community, also complained of an odor similar to a soap smell. And the plant manager said, well, this is not from us. A month later, a nearby business reported foam and an odor from the sewer on the property. So the ministry, they went on site, they attended that very day, and they made a connection between all these complaints. So what they saw, and also the two other complaints of the odor that was on the property. And so basically, the plant manager at that point told the inspector that a spill had occurred approximately a month ago. And the ministry told them forthright, you have to report spills to the ministry Spill Action Center. And the company told the Spill Action Center that there was a 200 liter spill of the product that was punctured at the loading dock. And the ministry, they did some more investigative work. They conducted lab tests to verify that the odor from the sewer was definitely the company's product. And the ministry's environmental and investigation branch ended up laying charges in this particular case. So let's take a look at the legislation. So Environmental Protection Act, Section 92, subsection 1, every person who spills a pollutant shall notify the ministry, so it's the Spills Action Center, municipality, pollutant owner, and pollutant controller. How much was the fine? With the 25%, it came to $75,000 for this case. So, friends, what do you think? How could something like this be prevented from happening at your workplace? Namely, like a spill that gets uncontrolled or a spill that doesn't get reported. How does this happen? So Josh says a spill kit. Catherine, prevent it from going to the water system. Thank you, Catherine. Written process for spill management. Yes, very good. Spill kits, training. Keep chemicals away from drains. Secondary containment. Spills response training. So these are excellent answers. Very good. So we just go into this a little bit deeper here. Now, in this particular area, the sewer system where this occurred, it collects wastewater from businesses to the wastewater plant for treatment, and then it goes back into the river system. But storm water on the roads goes into catch basins, the grates that are along the curbs, and this water goes to the nearest natural body of water that's untreated. That's why only rain and meltwater should go into the catch basin drums. So if a spill occurs, what needs to happen? And I noticed that on the chat there, quite a few mentioned a spill action plan. So here's some thoughts for you in terms of what the content could be of your spill action plan. Make sure the area is safe. If it's serious, call 911. Get help. Evacuate the area if necessary. Try to prevent more casualties. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment. Shut off the source. So that might mean placing the container upright, or closing a valve, or plugging the hole, or covering or blocking drains or catch basins. Notify management. For large hazardous spills too, like we've been talking about in this particular case, notify the city. The fire department has resources. Spill Action Center needs to be notified as appropriate. And attain and follow the safety data sheet information on spill and leak procedure. And if it's safe to do so, contain the spill. So use the spill kit or the absorbent material that you have to prevent further damage to the environment. Now, in terms of resources, we do have a video that it's well done. It's a short video, but it captures some of the hazards and control measures around the use of chemicals, and it's on our website, and you will have access to this. So here's another question for you, friends. Warehouses do not require safety data sheets for chemical products stored and not used. Is this true or is it false? So what do you think? So we're getting lots of lots of Bs. We see false is mentioned there as well. Okay, good. So the answer is false. So, some storage requirements are listed on the safety data sheet that, of course, need to be followed. So store away from heat and sunlight. Store in a well-ventilated area. Some of these tips are on safety data sheets. Store incompatible materials separately. So, for example, flammables and oxidizers. Ensure spill control measures are located near storage areas as well. So it might tell you what spill control measures are required, such as absorbents and so forth. Or it might have some information around storing flammables in an approved storage cabinet. So these are all excellent ideas. Let's take a look at this other case here. So a shunt driver backs into a security guard, causing a fatality. And just a little bit more details for your consideration here. Security guard was working night shift, performed work in the yard, including applying and removing glad hand locks in the trailers. So a shunt driver also worked nights, moving trailers within the yard. And one morning after 6 o'clock, the shunt driver advised the security that a trailer needed moving, prompting the security guard to remove the glad hand lock. So the guard walked to the trailer. It was still dark outside. And while the guard was at the front of the trailer, removing the glad hand lock, the shunt driver backed up to attach the trailer, crushing the guard. So what a horrific case. Now, interestingly, just a couple more details of this case. The shunt truck required some maintenance. The reverse alarm and spotlights were not working on the shunt truck. And the guard was also not wearing high-vis clothing. Security company delivered high-vis vests to the company. However, they were not distributed, or it was not ensured that these high-vis vests were worn. And the shunt driver did not see the guard when it reversed. So in this example here, what's the legislation in terms of contraventions? 25(2)(h), an employer shall take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker. So just showing due diligence. And we'll talk about what that means in a moment in terms of appropriate due diligence. The penalty was, with the victim surcharge, $250,000. So friends, after learning about this case, so you have a security guard that's working in low light conditions in the yard with the shunt driver. Security guard has the job to remove the glad hand lock, which locks out to the air brakes in the trailer, and then the shunt driver picks up the trailer. So thinking about things that could happen in your yard during low light conditions, what do you think could be done to prevent collisions? And I'll take a look at the chat. I'll monitor it for a moment, and I'll see what we've come up with here. So applying barriers. Thank you. Lock out the truck unsafe with no backup alarm. The driver could have climbed out to watch the guard work. Good. Thank you, Abe, for that. Lock out the trailer with malfunctioning equipment. Firm enforcement of safety rules. Yeah, very good. So we're getting into a lot of different areas here, and I appreciate the comment too from Ken on vehicle maintenance. Worker visibility is greatly enhanced when there's a color contrast. So typically high-vis clothing is worn during low light conditions or poor visibility, and there's a risk of collision and when working around mobile equipment at the same time. Now, interestingly, in Ontario, the legislation doesn't specifically say that you have to wear high-vis clothing. However, Section 20 of the Industrial Regulations says that barriers, warning signs, or other safeguards shall be used to protect pedestrians when there is a danger. Other safeguards. So this may include wearing high vis after a hazard assessment is completed. So even though personal protective equipment typically is the last line of defense, so to speak, when it comes to safety controls, sometimes it is necessary. And we saw from this case too the importance of maintenance that's directly connected to safety. And I appreciated how someone mentioned that in our chat. So how many of us, for example, would drive our cars with faulty brakes? Really, when working in low light conditions in a busy yard, faulty lights or malfunctioning reversing alarms can be just as hazardous as faulty brakes. So if a driver cannot see the guard in this place, he should apply, we think of the word GOAL, and this is really an acronym for get out and look. It's really as simple as that. And, you know, this should be done quickly too. So for example, a driver wouldn't get out and look and then wait a few minutes and then reverse, because a lot can change in a few minutes time. And you can see there are some of the other ideas that are mentioned there as well on this slide. So we do have a resource on personal protective equipment, and it does get into a few tips here. I've got the sheet in front of me here, and it does mention that the importance of having a personal protective equipment program and how that can be used effectively. Okay, so here's a knowledge check for you. We can you can type this in the chat as well. CSA requires that high visibility clothing worn in a warehouse be A, class 3 or 4, B, class 1 or 2, C, class 2 or 3, or D, no class necessary. So what do you think on this one? This one might be a little trickier. Okay, so we're starting to see some answers come in, and I'm just going to go to the answer. The answer is B, class 1 or 2. So when purchasing high-vis clothing, we just want to mention the design should meet the CSA standards. So look at the garment tag and see what it says. Class 1 or 2 apparel may be considered for a warehouse, and class 2 or 3 in a manufacturing environment. That's kind of the best practice when people work near mobile equipment or near vehicles. Seek advice from your supplier though, and talk about your specific environment and see what's recommended. But we just want to emphasize for this slide here, establish a proper personal protective equipment program. Give it some thought, you know, exactly what type of high-vis clothing do we want to be worn for our specific environment. But make sure it's follows CSA standard. Make sure it has good color contrast to the background of your environment. Make sure it's in good condition. The color contrast should not be faded. We've seen workers wearing high-vis clothing where after many years the contrast gets faded and it's no longer effective. Or we might see that it's not fastened appropriately on the worker, and that can be an issue as well. And you know, what about high-vis straps? Some have asked us, is that okay to wear high-vis straps as opposed to a vest? And the response that we've oftentimes give, well, you know, make sure it meets CSA standard Z96 2020 for high visibility apparel in Canada. Okay, so here's case number 9, worker struck by vehicle near the loading dock. So here's a couple more details. The worker was walking through a parking lot during early morning hours. And the movement was between 2 buildings at the back of the lot. It was across an open area between the loading zone and the parking lot. Now, the worker walked between 2 parked vehicles, or at least they appeared to be parked. Then one of the vehicles moved toward the worker, making a left-hand turn, and struck the worker. And the driver was from the same company, making deliveries. Now, the ministry had determined when they did their investigation that the lighting levels were not sufficient to ensure the safety of workers in the area. But what was most interesting in this case is the issue of lighting was raised by the Joint Health and Safety Committee just prior to the incident happening. And the company was convicted and fined 3 times prior to this over a 12-month period. So this is interesting. And when you look at the legislation here, we see that Section 21 of the industrial regs is highlighted, where natural lighting is inadequate, artificial lighting shall be provided, and shadows and glare shall be reduced to a minimum. So that's the legislation that was connected here. Now, how much was the fine? $150,000. So in this case, again, this is also a collision that happened in the yard, and it was during low light conditions. It was an employee that was walking through a dark area, and one of the delivery trucks left and struck the worker. So if we think of something similar at your workplace to avoid collisions, how could this have been prevented, or how can something similar be prevented at your workplace? And I'll just monitor the chat for a moment to see what you've come up with. And we see here, never put walkway in front of trailers. Yeah, thanks very much for that, Chuck. Yeah, nice comment. Establishing walkways. Separate parking lot from loading area. Yeah, very good. So a lot of your answers are really around separation, guarding, policy, training. Keep them separate. High vis could have been worn as well, even when entering facilities. Yeah, very good. So here's a couple more thoughts for you. You know, when it comes to lighting, is your outdoor lighting in your parking area in yard, is it sufficient? Outdoor lighting should be designed to provide adequate vision, and also with safety considerations taken into account. Lighting should be uniform without any dark patches or pockets. So it should be sufficient. Is there a preventative maintenance program or schedule on your parking lot lighting? Is it cleaned regularly? Do you swap out bulbs before they burn out so you always have good lighting? Do you maintain trees and landscaping to ensure none of your lighting is obstructed? These are simple things, but very important. And just some more questions you might even ask yourself around lighting is, where are your lights located? Are your lights at the appropriate height? Are your poles spaced apart at the right distance? And of course, we would recommend seeking advice from a lighting professional. And you know what's interesting in this case too that we just talked about, there was involvement with the Joint Health and Safety Committee, but it seems like there may have been some concerns with follow through. So, you know, ask yourself, does your committee inspect the outdoor yard area during low light conditions to make sure it's safe for traffic? And if the committee identifies a hazard, is this hazard addressed? And we might think of you know, even trip hazards in the parking lot, where you might have some potholes, and you combine that with low light conditions, that can be an issue. Or also it might be more conducive to crime occurring. So lighting experts, they do recommend certain foot candles in yards. Maybe we won't get into that for this, but you can look that up, and of course we would suggest seeking advice from lighting professionals. So here's an interesting resource that we applied to this case, and essentially with this resource, we're looking at you know, the interconnectivity between management and working effectively also with the Joint Health and Safety Committee. So just as a reminder, Section 9, subsection 20 of the Safety Act in Ontario, it says that an employer who receives written recommendations from a committee or co-chair shall respond in writing within 21 days. Now, to follow that, Section 9, subsection 21 mentions a response shall contain a timetable for implementing the recommendations the employer agrees with, and give reasons why the employer disagrees, if that's the case, and why recommendations may not be accepted. So that's just a little bit more information to make sure there's good communication and, of course, follow through with the between management and the JHSC. So here's a knowledge check. Vehicle incidents can occur because of A, limited visibility, B, inadequate separation, C, lack of attention, D, inadequate controls, and E, all of the above. So what do you think in that case? So we're seeing lots of E's here. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Does that apply? And you know, when you think of this particular case here, just to reiterate a couple of things. Yeah, you might have limited visibility in the yard due to inadequate lighting. That could be these are real hazards. Pedestrians not walking on marked paths, and a lot of you indicated this in the chat. Both the driver and pedestrian may not be aware of the hazards. They could be distracted, as an example. Traffic controls may not be planned. As an example, if a truck's leaving during low light conditions, should they just tap on the horn lightly to warn any pedestrians that may be nearby, and pedestrians not walking on designated paths as well? So all of the above. Okay, so here's our last one. So this is case number 10. Forklift tips over, causing a fatality. So a worker was performing duties in the outside yard and was operating a motorized lift truck. Now, he drove the lift truck around a sharp 90-degree turn at a very high speed. So this caused the lift truck to tip on its side, resulting in a fatal injury. Now, the 32-year-old man was pronounced dead when the OPP arrived on the scene, when the police arrived on the scene. Now, after the ministry investigated, it was determined that the operator was not wearing the restraining equipment or the seatbelt when the incident occurred. And, you know, in contrast, I have a colleague, I won't mention his name, but he mentioned that the seatbelt definitely saves lives. So his lift truck went off the edge of a loading dock, and when the trailer left prematurely, the lift truck came crashing down to the pavement below the dock. However, wearing the seatbelt caused his body to remain within the frame of the lift truck. And he'll tell you that that saved his life. So the battery busted, acid spilled out, the hip was broken. However, he completely recovered. And the seatbelt, though, prevented him from being crushed. So, yeah, you know, when we look at this case here, it's horrific. So here's the legislation that's applied, 25(2)(a) of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. An employer shall provide information, instruction, and supervision to a worker to protect the health or safety of the worker. So in this case, it was really around instruction about wearing the seatbelt. That was sort of the crux of the matter. The penalty was over $93,000. So friends, same question. How could this have been prevented? And I'll just glance at the chat here and see what your comments are. And I see Chuck here made a comment: if using a truck outside, you should have pneumatic tires on the truck. An inside truck should not be used outside due to elevations. Thank you for that insightful comment, Chuck. 4 safety rules: sign off training, invest in dock locks, use an outdoor power industrial truck, PIT. Okay, good. Truck won't operate without seatbelt. Yeah, that's very good. Lower the top seat of the lift truck. Low speed when making a turn, and 4 safety systems. Yeah, these are really good suggestions. So friends, here's a couple of ideas, and again, I think you hit on most of these, but really we just want to reiterate that seatbelts should be worn. The seatbelt will prevent our instinctive reaction to jump away from the lift truck during a tip over, which has proved to be fatal in numerous cases. Some trucks will have a safety feature where it won't operate without the seatbelt secured. And I believe somebody made a comment on this in the chat as well. And this may work. However, you just need to watch for operators that may try to bypass the safety by perhaps securing the seatbelt and then sitting on top of it. So you just have to watch for that. It has happened. The CSA standard for lift trucks B335 is currently being updated. Hopefully it will be available by approximately mid-2025. And it does have a section in there on operator restraint system. And basically it says there that the operator needs to wear the restraint system. And older lift trucks that don't have that, really consideration should be made to retrofitting these trucks whenever feasible. So think about it simply. A lift truck weighs some 9,000 pounds. The average weight of a large car is around 4,000 pounds. So imagine having the weight of a large car fall on you. Now a lift truck is more than twice that weight. So, ask yourself at your workplace, do your lift truck operators always wear their seatbelts? And if they don't always wear their seatbelts, then why don't they wear it? And we've gone into some workplaces and the operator has said, well, I have to exit my lift truck some 20 times over a few hours. So wearing a seatbelt is just simply not practical. Well, our simple answer to that would be that safety trumps perceived inconvenience in every case. So here's some resources that we have as well. This is a video that we have. We've got quite a few actually small snippet videos that are around the warehouse distribution theme, including traffic management. And this particular one is what should lift truck operators know about seatbelts. So here's a bit of a knowledge check for you. If a stand-up reach truck is tipping, the operator should step back away from the machine. Is this true or is it false? So we're getting a lot of trues here. Okay, excellent. So yeah, your answer is great. And we just want to reiterate, when operating a sit-down counterbalance lift truck, so I want to reiterate, a sit-down counterbalance lift truck, the operator during a tip over should keep both hands on the steering wheel while bracing during the tip over. Press both feet on the floor and try to ensure some stability and try to lean in the opposite direction of the fall. But the only exception to the rule in terms of stay within the machine is for those that may be operating a stand-up rider forklift. So, and I just want to mention here, follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations. But stand-up rider operators usually have opportunity to just simply step off and away from the machine during a tip over. So if a machine is going off the dock, for an example. But some manufacturers, they do recommend abandoning the machine when this type of accident is unavoidable. So friends, we're just coming to the end of our session here. We have approximately 5 minutes to go. And I really appreciate everyone contributing to this session by your answers and knowledge sharing. And when we just go back here for a moment, when we looked at all these cases, we considered a lot of different examples: distracted drivers, walking through the yard at night, reversing in the workplace. We looked at also trucks that are backing up to the loading dock that might not have a clear view. The importance of spills and how you need to have an adequate spill control plan, and also paying attention to good housekeeping. So we covered off actually a lot of different points here in the approximately hour and a half that we had here. And we really appreciate your comments. And we just want to mention here for your knowledge that WSPS does have an amazing amount of resources on our website. So simply go to WSPS.ca, and The resources that I referred to here are all downloadable on our website. We have general occupational health and safety consulting that you can access as well. That you have. We have site visits for advice that can be made maybe at no cost. We have technical consulting, traffic management programs, development. We have material handling process review and action plan, and a technical awareness and inspection of steel storage racks, which includes a walkthrough of the facility as well. So these are just a few of the ways that we help businesses to achieve their safety goals.
Yeah, so we're just right on time there, Norm. Thank you so much. And again, during the introduction, we talked about connecting with each other. We're so eager to hear from you. So please do reach out to us if you ever have any questions, want to share maybe some ideas or exchange some ideas and best practices. Thanks so much for joining us today. You will receive a follow-up email as well. In regards to some of the resources, even though I was posting them in our chat and trying to respond to the chat as fast as possible. Norm, as always, it is always a pleasure to listen to you and to walk through. You just have a dynamic personality that we can learn from. So thank you so much for your time, Norm.
Thank you so much, Jen, and for everyone for attending the session today, Safety Connections. And we really appreciate your participation. And, I'll just maybe finish off by saying, you can see the contact information there. If you've learned something that really resonated with you, and perhaps you've had some time to implement some of the suggestions or recommendations that were discussed today, and you've had positive outcomes, feel free to reach out to myself or Jen. We'd love to hear those types of stories and how safety really is making a positive impact in your workplace and having great outcomes as a result. So we're just a minute or two before 12 noon. Thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. And feel free to reach out at any time. Thanks so much.
And be well.